Hello, it's Phil Croshaw again from Passions. In this video interview clip taken from a recent interview I did with TV presenter and conservationist Giles Clark, Giles talks about a project that he's heavily involved in, which involves rehoming elephants in Zimbabwe. What an amazing project. So if you're interested in finding out more about it, or you're interested in contributing in any way to the project, then please contact Giles, and I'm sure he'd be very happy to hear from you. Enjoy the clip. Okay, hello, I'm Phil Croshaw, and welcome to yet another edition of Passions Live. And I'm delighted today to be welcoming back a guest, actually, through popular demand and notoriety. I'm delighted to be welcoming back Giles Clark to the show. I'll let Giles introduce himself, but some of you may have seen an initial interview I did a few months ago with Giles, and he's doing a new project, and we just had to get him on to talk about the new project. So a very warm welcome again to Passions, Giles. Tell us, for those people who don't know, tell us who you are and what your passion is.
Well, first of all, Phil, thank you so much for having me back. It's a real pleasure. I really, I enjoy doing these type of interviews all the time, but I immensely enjoyed our last one. So again, you know, I'm grateful for you having me back. Who am I? Well, I'm a passionate conservationist would be the best way to describe, you know, what I do. I'm not a scientist. I started my career as a zookeeper, but very quick when I was a teenager, so many moons ago now. But I very quickly realized that for me, it wasn't about just looking after animals in captivity. You know, giving them the best quality of life we can is really important, and their welfare. But ultimately, it's about trying to help, support, and keep them in the wild. And so throughout the course of my, whether we want to call it a career or vocation, whatever it is, for the last 2.5 decades, you know, whatever I've done with working with and looking after animals in captivity, I've tried to extrapolate that so it becomes about supporting conservation efforts. And over the last 8 or 9 years, some of our viewers might recognize my not so young face anymore from doing several series with the BBC. So we've got a strand called About the House that follows various journeys that I've been on initially, probably always with some form of baby and cute individual, and we follow their journey. But ultimately, it's about always talking about and telling the conservation challenges, if you like, that their wild counterparts face in the wild.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we'll come back to that. So I'm going to start off just by letting everybody know how this second interview really came about. And this is absolutely true, and Giles, I'm sure, will back me up on this. We're doing a panel show later in May, looking to try and get together world-renowned conservation people to discuss various different topics as part of the Passions journey. And I was fortunate enough to be able to message Giles and say, are you available on this date? And the exact message he came back with, and he will confirm this, was something to the equivalent of, I'm not quite sure because I might be walking with elephants in Zimbabwe then. And I did laugh, and I showed it to a few of my friends and what have you, because, you know, people quite often come up with all sorts of reasons and excuses why they can't do things. You know, oh, sorry, I've got to go to my mother's for tea, or whatever it might be. But I can honestly say that's the first time that particular reason for not being around has ever come back. So obviously you're very well known for your work with the big cats, and of course you work with the big cat sanctuary, which you can talk about a little bit later if you like. And then of course you got into the bears as well. Yeah. And now all of a sudden not content with those particular animals and probably many others, we now are planning on, or you are off next week to walk with elephants in Zimbabwe. Talk to me about the project.
Well, it's not just walking, if you like. It's about helping a very good friend of mine move some elephants that she has. And I suppose in the same way as, like you touched on, big cats has always been, the most sort of natural link for me, because they're the animals that I have historically looked after in zoos and in sanctuaries. And then I moved on to bears, and that came about because I'm for many years was a very good friend with Matt Hunt, who's the CEO of Free the Bears, the organisation that is and still works in Southeast Asia, rescuing bears from the wildlife trade. Well, I've also got a very good friend in Zimbabwe called Roxy, and Roxy and her family run a sanctuary in the capital called Harare. And historically, she has taken on wildlife that has needed to be rescued. If it can be rehabilitated and returned and released to the wild, that's exactly what she does. Or if it can't, then she tries in much the same way as the sanctuaries that we were working with Free the Bears in Southeast Asia. If it can't, she tries and gives it a quality of life in captivity. And she's done this for many years. And then at the height of the poaching crisis in 2012, she was getting multiple requests about taking on baby elephants. But baby elephants are a complete new kettle of fish, so to speak, and the resources and the logistics, as well as the infrastructure that it takes, is on a whole new level. But that's exactly what she did. She started to take on elephants and very quickly grew. So they've rescued now, probably close to 30 elephants. Some have been slightly bigger, so they don't necessarily come to the nursery. They get moved, rescued from whatever the circumstances are, and they get moved out to a conservation concession property that they operate. And others, when they're tiny babies and they're very vulnerable, and either they've been abandoned because their mums and the herd have had to leave if they've been caught in a well, or their mothers have been killed either through human elephant conflict or through poaching, or whatever the circumstances. Roxy takes these tiny babies. She usually bundles them into a plane, as much as crazy as it sounds, into a caravan plane, a bit bigger than a Cessna, but only just, and brings them to the nursery, gets them through that first, critical 6 months where it's touch and go every day, and starts to rehabilitate them. And they can only stay at the nursery for so long. There's only so much that can be done at the nursery. And so then after a number of years, so some individuals, if they're incredibly healthy, very confident, psychologically ready, they might just be 2. Others might be a bit older, sometimes between 3 and 4. But she then moves them out, ready for their next stage, to her, as I said, a place called Panda Masuri, which is a conservation lease concession that they run, which backs onto protected areas over near Victoria Falls, so right over the other side of the country. And I've been talking to, I try and help out when and where I can. Actually, reminds me, another very good point we must touch on. Don't let me forget to talk about dogs, because I've got a link with dogs and Zimbabwe as well that I really wanted to bring up. But what we're doing is next week we're getting ready to move half a dozen, maybe even 7 of these young elephants over to Panda Masuri, so they can start the next stage in their rehabilitation. Now, this isn't, none of this is quick. So some of these elephants she's already been looking after for 2 or 3 years at the nursery. Once we get them out to the future release site, they will still need quite intensive care for the next 12 to 18 months before they really start to integrate back into the wild. But in terms of success, there's already a number of elephants that have done this journey before and are now starting to integrate and become wild elephants. They're accepted by the wild elephants in the area. They quite often will spend multiple nights out with the wild herds before they come back in to check with their human carers. So, it's something that I'm intensely excited about. Now, on the side of that's my something that, the aspect that I'm incredibly passionate about. But beyond that, the thing that really always excites me is having the ability to be able to tell and share and communicate the things that I do and the journeys that I go on, because ultimately that's such a crucial part. Raising awareness and helping educate is such a crucial part of what will be needed to ultimately save species, save the planet, and save ourselves. And so, as we quickly touched on, I've multiple times now filmed different series for the BBC. This time we're doing things a little bit different. So myself and a small team of people are going out to actually independently film and capture this operation, if you like. And then the idea is that we can come back, spend a few weeks in the edit, we put together something that really does it justice, really looks like it could ultimately sit on any of the networks or platforms. And on the back of that, we can then hopefully get commissioned a much bigger series, not just about Wild is Life, which is this organisation and those individual elephants, although incredibly important to me, but it's about then trying to get a series about the bigger context of elephants in Africa, about the challenges that they face, about the conservation challenges.